think we'll get started. So welcome everybody to the third and final session of the 2024 CChem conference. And today's session is going to be all about mentoring for CChem. So there's going to be lots happening in the session this afternoon. We've got some really great speakers. You'll be hearing from Claire Gallery-Strong, who's our session chair. She's based at Nuclear Waste Services. We're also joined by Gordon Kelly from Johnson Matthey, Paul O'Neill from our SSL, and there'll also be an opportunity to ask your questions to the panel at the end. During the session today, you'll be supported by RSC staff. So my name's Claire Sycamore-Howe. I'm the Accreditation and Chartered Status Specialist at the Royal Society of Chemistry, but I'm also joined by my colleagues Kim Smith and Shreyan Patel. If there's any issues or you have any questions that maybe you don't want to put in the Q&A, you can get in contact with the team either via the chat or via email. So just some housekeeping points. As I've already said, please add your questions to the Q&A. We'll save all questions to the end. If you do experience any technical issues, you can contact the team via the chat and that'll be monitored throughout the session. Please treat others with courtesy and respect throughout today's session. And there's also access to support and the slides from today through the Padlet, and that will be popped in the chat shortly. So I'm now going to pass over to our session chair, who's another Claire Gallery-Strong, to introduce the topic. Over to you, Claire.
Good morning, everybody, and I'm absolutely delighted to talk to you about an important topic, which is, of course, mentoring. And I'm going to start by saying that as a corporate services director for a nuclear waste business, I wouldn't be at the career level I'm at if I hadn't had support of mentors, which is really why I'm keen to share with you some of my experience and hopefully encourage you to take a turn and perhaps help others in their career, as well as developing your own career through the art of mentoring. You're going to hear from myself, Gordon and Paul today. We'll share with you some of our experiences. Really excited to hear what you want to ask of us, what curiosity you might have around how we can all help each other be better, more effective mentors, and also that part around developing other people and what's our role in it. There's some really great topics there. What will I start by saying? Corporate Services Director for a Nuclear Waste Business. I kind of gave you a bit of an intro tag, and perhaps it's made you a little curious about how come a chartered chemist, chartered scientist and fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry is in this space. I would start by saying absolutely my career is richly founded in the science and engineering matters that I originally graduated in. I've worked across environmental, pharmaceutical, and entered into nuclear very much originally in the field of research. I didn't think I would end up as a corporate services director, and I didn't necessarily think I would end up in nuclear. And mentoring has played a path, both from me being mentored and in the mentoring I've done for others to take me to where I'm at. One thing I think is really important to share with you is that as I developed my career through the fields of science and engineering, in project program and portfolio management, mentoring has helped me remain deeply rooted with my core strength of chemical sciences. I think competency has become increasingly important in the field of professionalism, and being able to demonstrate my continued competence as a chartered chemist and in turn mentor for others has been an absolute foundation to help me remain deeply linked. Having that competency became increasingly important to me as I became further away from my core foundations in science and engineering. And I will tell you, I'm very proud to be a chartered chemist, a chartered scientist, and a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry. And I talk about it, and I talk about it with others, which is why people approach me for mentoring. It did, though, also become increasingly important for me to help others on their journey. And I volunteered for mentoring quite early on in my career, as soon, in fact, as I gained my own chartered chemist. Now, that can seem quite a daunting task when you perhaps have just achieved a chartered chemist, but equally it can seem daunting if you have done your chartered chemist some years ago and you may think what has happened and what has changed. Remember, fundamentally, the fields of science and engineering and chemical sciences that we have, that hasn't fundamentally changed. Our role and our experience adds a lot to mentoring. So over 25 years ago, I began mentoring. I'm like, wow. And talking to the panelists before you joined today, we've realized amongst us, we have mentored for well over 100 candidates. Personally, I've mentored for RSI Tech, for MRSC, and also Chartered Chemist. And being able at times to help people all their way through those professional accreditations for their career. I've seen people right through from the RSI Tech through to being proud chemists, and many LinkedIn posts around their Chartered Chemist applications. One thing I'd say is working with those other professional scientists in their career at different stages has been really enlightening for me. I have learned so much, and that's something perhaps we don't see when we look outside. For you as a mentor, there is a lot to also learn from those you're mentoring. And my day job at the moment is leading human resources, information technology, transformation, and stakeholder and communications. So being able to reach into the organization to a chemist to help them with their chartered chemist career really helps me remain connected with the field, and it helps me remain connected with what is happening in our business, which is very important as you become a leader. There's a lot of mentors that is much broader than the piece purely around helping somebody else. It's surprising how much it also helps me. What else would I say? Perhaps some key takeaways about mentoring would be really helpful for me to share with you. I have a very structured approach. That probably wouldn't surprise you because as chemists, we've probably all had some structures in how we go about doing our jobs. I typically agree a framework with the person who wishes to be mentored. And when I say a framework, it's not over complex. We agree things like how frequently would it be appropriate for us to meet. We also set provisional milestones. And when I say that, I would just say to you, it's important to understand that their plan for achieving Chartered Chemist might not be to try and get it done in 2 years. It might be over a longer time scale. They may just want to connect over time. Having that understanding of roughly the provisional milestones that they're seeking to achieve is a really helpful discussion at the outset. I'd also reflect that understanding what different types of evidence they might consider for their portfolio early on is really helpful because it's quite a broad landscape, and just having some early indications of these are the types of work that you engage in, and so these are the sorts of evidence your portfolio might look like, helps them set themselves out. There's one thing I always do with my mentee when I first start. I ask them to write their CV. And it's funny how they can be quite surprised over that. It's really important. I get them to put their CV in their portfolio of evidence on day one. And it's a great way to reflect when you come forward as you go to year one or year two, if they're not a direct entry. It's amazing how 2 years down the line, a chartered chemist can go, wow, I didn't realize how much more I've grown in my career, and it helps them understand and reflect on their depth of knowledge. So a great tip, might seem really basic, get a basic CV straight away into your portfolio evidence and get your mentee to do that. I think perhaps the most surprising thing for me has been the portfolio of evidence validation and how much I've enjoyed working and reading through people's work and giving somebody that credit and recognition for a job well done. Quite often in your day job, you don't get that. You are so busy working through and achieving your delivering what you're supposed to be doing that having that mentor step back with you and go, this is really powerful, and be proud of your work. It's that has really surprised me how important that part of mentoring to help others recognize what they have done and take credit for it is really important. And I have felt really humbled by how people have come back to me after they've achieved Chartered Chemist to say how much it has meant to have a support as a mentor throughout that process. And then I will say to you that I have mentors. And some of my mentors have seen me the whole way through my career. And the person who helped me achieve my Chartered Chemist went on to nominate me and support me for achieving my Fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry. He also supported me in my volunteering roles in the Royal Society of Chemistry. And today I am Treasurer of the Royal Society of Chemistry. Really proud to be Treasurer. I'm really proud to help contribute to the important work of our society. None of that would be possible if I had not had a mentor, and that mentor hadn't sponsored, supported, and encouraged me to think about the things I could do. So that is probably the other thing I'd say to you as mentor. Please think about how you can encourage others to volunteer in the Royal Society of Chemistry and how they can support us as chemical scientists. And at that point, I'm going to stop speaking because there has lots of other knowledge and experience with Gordon and Paul, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more from them about their experiences. And Gordon, I'm going to just hand over to you at this point, and I'll go on mute and look forward to hearing more.
I'm going to jump in here, Claire, because it's me first. Sorry, Gordon.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. I am going to give you a brief introduction to mentoring for CChem. So hopefully those slides are sharing correctly. My name is Claire Sycamore-Howes. I've already said I'm part of the CChem team here. And what we're going to be covering today is quite a top level introduction for mentoring for CChem. If you would like a more in-depth session, we're running a mentor training session that's taking place next week. Today we're going to be focused on a bit of background to professional awards, what is mentoring for CChem, mentoring styles, your role as part of mentoring, and also the help that's available to you and your mentee. So first, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the wards and how membership fits together if you aren't familiar with the membership structure or the RSC. So the RSC is a learned society and professional body in the chemical sciences, and we've got over 50,000 members across the chemical sciences. So membership isn't the same as professional awards, but they sit quite complementary to each other. In terms of checking eligibility for things like membership and chartership, there's no need for you to do that as a mentor. RSC staff will undertake that for you, so that isn't something that you need to worry about. In terms of the membership levels, we go from affiliate up to fellow, but member is really where we're interested and where we start to see Chartered Chemist come in. So an MRSC level, we start to see those higher level qualifications, that higher level of knowledge. We'd expect somebody to be working at master's level or above. They're also really developing those more complex skills such as problem solving, perhaps they're in leadership, and this is all where it links to Chartered Chemist. For all of our professional awards, whether that's Chartered Chemist, Registered Scientist, what we're interested in is we're having a more in-depth look at a wider range of competencies and skills that we'd expect professional scientists to be using. So when we think about professional awards, we should probably take a moment to just discuss what makes a professional scientist or professional chemist. We'd expect a professional chemist to have specialist subject knowledge that those outside of your profession wouldn't have. We'd expect your role to be working at a relatively high level to demonstrate the skills that we'd expect for the relevant professional awards. We'd also expect that you'd have those qualifications to support your experience, and also that you'll have that experience through different roles, and that you'd be continuing to develop your technical skills throughout your job. CChem really pulls all of these different aspects together. So really what I hope you're starting to see here is that Chartered Chemist pulls through everything that your mentee will already be doing as part of their job. So they're going to pull together those subject special knowledge, those workplace experiences, and Chartered Chemist is designed to sit alongside somebody's work with the role that they're already in. In terms of the routes to CChem, I'm just going to cover this briefly so that you've got a bit of background when I'm talking about different things later on. But there's 3 different routes to CChem. So there's the professional development route. You'll hear this shortened to PDP. This is for those that are a much earlier point in their career, and it's really providing people at an early point in their career with that structure and support that they really need to achieve CChem. For those who've got more experience, we offer a direct route for CChem. They have less time to submit, it's within a 12-month window. In terms of mentoring, it's more retrospective perhaps, rather than looking for development opportunities. And then we also offer routes to CChem through accredited training schemes. So this is has candidates that are a mix of both really, and this is bespoke to a certain employer. If you're on an accredited training scheme or you're mentoring on an accredited training scheme, you'll know the requirements that are specialist to your employer. To give you a brief overview of CChem, if you're not familiar with Chartered Chemist and our attribute areas, the application for Chartered Chemist will allow your mentee to focus on building and using their chemistry knowledge. So this is covered under the A attributes. It'll help them understand what professionalism looks like for them, how they work in a team, working with others effectively, and also contributing to improvement across the organisation as well. We'll also be looking for professional chemists to deliver those high-level communication skills that will help them progress. That comes under the C attributes. A D area refers to social and environmental responsibilities. So this is responsibilities to our employer, responsibilities to sustainability and the environment, and also discussing ethical practice as well. And the final area is the E attribute area, which is actively supporting the community. So being more supportive, and the RSC is unique in that we're one of the only professional bodies that asks for their chartership that you do go a little bit above and beyond maybe and show how you're proactively being an active member of the chemical sciences as well. If you're not already familiar with the CChem attribute areas, please visit our website so you can have a look. There's 14 attributes that sit under here. We don't have time to go into all of them today, but if you have got any questions, please do get in contact with the team. So why do applicants need a mentor as part of their chartership application? So all applicants need a mentor for CChem, whether they're applying directly to the RSC or whether they're going through an accredited training scheme. Everybody will require a mentor. Mentors really provide that support and guidance through the application process, but they'll also provide that additional context and information to the RSC as well. You'll help your applicant understand the process a little bit more. If you have particular questions about eligibility, as I've already said, please do get in contact with the team. But you'll also be working with your mentee to set some goals as well and really help them to understand their development areas and perhaps skills that they could work on. You'll be discussing the applicant's evidence with them, helping them to identify suitable evidence for their application. We'd also expect that you'd appropriately challenge the applicant as well. However, we do expect that the applicant would take ownership of their development, and really you'll be providing that additional support to the applicant with their application, with evidence, providing guidance on confidentiality, particularly if you work in industry. Really, you're the person that will help them identify those professional skills that we would expect a chemist who's working in the professional sciences to be demonstrating. I'm going to now move on and talk specifically about what a CChem mentor is. So it's somebody who supports chemists on their professional development, specifically to the award of Chartered Chemist. You'll be providing mentoring support within a very specific time frame. You will also be providing mentoring within a very specific framework, and that framework is through the CChem attributes. You'll be ensuring that the applicant is progressing and meeting our standards. You'll be having those confidentiality discussions with them, but you'll also be making sure that the conversations you do have with them are kept confidential. You'll be demonstrating that professionalism and support for the chemical sciences by acting as a CChem mentor, and you'll also be an active listener as well. In terms of what is mentoring for CChem, so mentoring for CChem is slightly different to mentoring or coaching that you may have done outside of CChem, because there's very specific requirements, and there's also we're looking at it through the lens of the attribute. So for all of the applicants, there's very clear and well-defined goals because of the 14 attributes that they're working towards. And these are really getting them to demonstrate the skills and competencies that we would expect of a professional chemist. The time frames, depending on whether you're working with somebody who's on the PDP route or the direct route, are also very well defined, because you've got 12 months through direct, or you've got 2 years with PDP. As I've already said, we would expect that the mentoring will be driven by your mentee, because at the end of it, there is a benefit to them in the award of Chartered Chemist. So we would expect the real push for the application and the meetings and things to all be coming from your mentee, and your role there is really to guide them and sort of coach them a little bit through the process. In terms of the kind of skills, we will talk about this a little bit in more detail when we go on to mentoring styles, but usually we would say that coaching focuses very specifically on the job and maybe the skills needed. So when you're coaching, there's normally quite defined goals. It's quite specifically time bound. Normally you're focusing on sort of like the skills and techniques when you're working with somebody. And there can sometimes be quite sort of specific yes and no discussions that you're having as well. So that's sort of the coaching aspect of CChem. And then when we're thinking about mentoring more generally, mentoring normally tends to focus on the person, their career path, and their future development. So depending whether you're working with somebody on direct or PDP, these mentoring aspects for CChem are going to come in. So talking to you also will probably want to talk to them more generally about their career goals as well, and understanding why they want to achieve CChem, what's the drive for them, and the benefits to them as well. You also might talk to them about things like their motivation, why they want CChem, and also understanding perhaps about the different developmental opportunities that are coming up for them as well, and whether they could use any of that to support their CChem application. So hopefully, as I've gone through that, you can start to understand a little bit that mentoring and coaching both form 2 different aspects of CChem as well. In terms of the mentoring styles, we quite often see different mentoring styles and approaches at the time that you're working with a CChem applicant on their application. Your style might change as you go through the process with them. So an advocate we would normally see as somebody who
Can I just check? Has anybody else lost Claire?
Yeah, I think we've lost Claire there. Shall I carry on? Oh,
yes, please.
Slides. So these are the different styles of mentoring. Oh, Claire's back. Are you back, Claire? Oh, we can't hear you now.
Claire, I suggest we'll ask Kim to complete this, because you were going a bit glitchy for the last few slides.
Okay.
So
let's ask
that's
Kim
fine.
Can you carry on sharing the slides, Claire, please? And I'll just. So we have some different styles. We have an advocate. I think Claire got through that one. We ask you to be a supporter of your mentee, to support them on their CChem journey and give them some ideas for the evidence they can use. Teaching is something that you probably won't need to do as a CChem mentor as much. We might be asked, you might need to perhaps do a skills gaps analysis and maybe look at some resources to help them fill those skills gaps. But we do ask you to be a critical friend rather than just critical when you're looking at these particular applications. All mentors have different experiences, And those experiences can help your mentee in a variety of ways. You will have different experiences to your mentee, and you will all be at different career stages. Some mentors are quite experienced. We also have mentors who've just gained CChem, and we have early career mentors. And obviously they all bring different things to the mentoring process. Can I have the next slide, please, Claire? I think I've lost Claire completely now. Thank you. So what are the elements for Chartered Chemist? The mentee needs to write 14 attributes. To meet the 14 attributes, the mentee needs to write 14 reflective written statements and produce primary evidence. There's a maximum of 45 pages on this primary evidence. They also need a mentor or a mentor plus a referee. The mentor and the referee can be the same person. The referee is there just to confirm that the work contained in this portfolio and in those attributes are the mentee's own. What do we expect from the mentor? So again, it's guidance, it's coaching, and it's really picking out what evidence is going to fulfill those attributes well. So we expect you to talk to your mentee about how they can meet these attributes and how they can write their written statements. We often find that mentees don't really think they're meeting some of the attributes, but when the mentor talks to them and asks them to reflect on their work, that often becomes clear that they are meeting the attribute. We ask a mentor to write 5 supportive statements. We ask you to make statements against each of the 5 areas in the CChem application. So we ask you to make general comments on your mentee's use of the knowledge of chemistry that they have, how they apply their skills. We ask you to talk about their communication influencing skills, their professional responsibilities, and finally, have they been a good science citizen? Assessors do look at these mentor statements, and occasionally we see mentees are perhaps a little bit reluctant to come forward and push themselves, and often the mentor statements give a little bit more in-depth information on those statements, and the assessors will look at your mentor statements. We ask the mentor to make the first peer recommendation as to whether the mentee is at the CChem level. Could you go on one, please, Claire? Thank you. So how does the CChem mentoring journey work? The initial thing is forming a relationship with your mentee, and that's quite crucial in order for this to work. We do ask you to have regular meetings with your mentee at various times. We do ask that your mentee pushes this relationship forward, and your mentee asks for those meetings. So it's their work, it's their application. They should really be pushing this. You are just there to support and help them. So the mentee gathers and reviews the evidence and examples with you. You then get down to refining their application and checking that that evidence actually matches what they've written in their statements, and whether they've actually got the correct evidence for the statement, whether the statement actually reflects their abilities. And finally, we ask you to make that final comment on whether you think they're ready for CChem. Next slide, please, Claire. So how can you support your mentee? One way of doing this is to encourage your mentee to talk about what they've done. So, for example, on section A, ask them where and how they use their chemistry knowledge. So it's about asking them questions. When they've put their written statements in, what we really want to know is what the mentee is trying to say and what their impact was in this. So it's worth asking them, okay, so you did this, so what? What was your impact? Thing to really keep in mind, though, is this is not a scientific report. So it won't read like a scientific report. We need everything to be in the first person. We want to know what your mentee has done, not what the company has done, not what the person who works next to them has done. What has your mentee done? So it needs to be written in the first person. A lot of mentees find that quite difficult because they're used to writing scientific reports and saying what the team has done and how the chemistry is going, not what they've done. If they're going on for an interview, and this is for the schemes predominantly, we would ask you to go through the application Make sure your mentee is familiar where their examples are and how their evidence and practice meet the attributes completely, and how good they are explaining that science behind their work. And while they're doing that work, what transferable skills did they use? Could you move me on, please, Claire? So what are the challenges you might find? Obviously, finding the time to meet. I've already said this should really be driven by the mentee. The mentee, it is their work. They need to take ownership of this application. So they should be really asking you to meet and booking those times in. Struggling on what to cover. It could be a good idea to set out what you will cover in each meeting, particularly for that first meeting. It's probably good to have an agenda for what you will go over. There may be unrealistic expectations. You may be expecting your mentee to move too fast, or your mentee may expect you to perhaps virtually write it for them. But this is where we ask you to be a critical friend, not just critical. And so we ask you to maybe manage those expectations a little. And of course, the thing that we really don't want to happen is there might be low compatibility between yourself and your mentee, in which case it may be that they may have to change mentors. Next slide, please, Claire. So what support is there for your mentees? You're not on your own here. Us, at the RSC, we have lots of support for your mentees that they can also access. We have specific attribute guidance. So there are a set of videos we have. We run webinars. We do portfolio guidance. So, for example, we run CChem consultations where we will give advice on pre-written statements if we can see them, or we will advise them how to maybe evidence some of the attributes. We run CChem cafes. They usually run the first Friday of every month, I think. I could be wrong, could be the last Friday. Anyway, that is where we get all the applicants together. Obviously, they don't all turn up, but the idea is that it's peer-to-peer learning, really. But there is always a member of RSC staff there to answer questions, and we occasionally have assessors in on those as well. There are ideas sheets on the members area, and I would encourage you to get your mentee to look at these. They give ideas for how best to lay out their portfolio, various examples of evidence, various ideas of what they can put in for their statements. We run the CChemConference. This session is part of that. They can ask any questions of RSC staff via email. Maybe Sharon could just type the email box in the chat, please, so that you know it's cchem@rsc.org anyway. And we can also help by managing confidentiality. Confidentiality is often a big issue in applications that we see, and we can talk to them about how best to manage that. We are also there for mentors, so if you have any questions, we can also answer those for you as well. Next slide, please, Claire. So what are our expectations of CChem Mentor? We do ask you to meet with your mentee regularly. I've said this so many times now, but the mentee should be driving that. They need to take ownership of this. We ask you to assess and monitor the standard and quality of both their written statements and the evidence that they provide to go with those, particularly in matching up whether the evidence matches the statements. We would ask you to support completion of the portfolio. Often people get stuck halfway. They're very enthusiastic at the start, and then there comes a lull. So we would ask you to support completion and try to push them on where you can. And provide the links and network if you can. Again, there may be, if you do a skills gap analysis with them, you may find that they might need maybe to shadow somebody else in the business to provide something for one of the attributes, and you may be able to provide that for them. We would ask you to know the requirements for CChem and also your mentee's workplace and how the two match up. We'd ask you to assess when your mentee is ready. It's not always when they've finished the attributes. Sometimes they may need to go back because they've found a better example, or you know they can do better. Often people will start writing and then they will go back over it because as they write, they get better. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And And again, we ask you to provide the assessors with the feedback. That's where you write those statements against the 5 areas of the CChem attributes. Is there another slide, Claire, or is that the last one? That might be the last one. Do you know if that's, I suspect I've lost Claire again.
Well, I think Kim, I think you're at the end, because she
Yeah.
would have.
I think
she was able to keep going for us. So thank you so much for everybody's patience while we had a little bit of a hiccup there in our chairing. I think poor Claire was doomed from the start when I tried to skip her and go straight to Gordon. So yeah, thanks very much, Kim, for taking us through that, and great refresher for us, even those experienced mentors, to hear that. It's really insightful. Some of the things like, oh yeah, I've forgotten kind of a bit of that. Should we hand over to Gordon and hear more about, start to hear more from Gordon and Paul now about their mentoring experience? Gordon, I'll leave you to do your introduction.
Yes, I'm ready. I don't have any slides. It's just what I'm going to talk about. So I don't know what you want to put up in there.
We've managed to mute you, Gordon, by somehow, so see if you can release it.
Yes, I'm back. What I was going to say, I was very interested in what Claire Gallery Strong had to say at the start, because a lot of what she went through is going to mirror a lot of what I'm going to speak about as well. So that was very interesting. But I'll introduce myself first. So in terms of who I am, I did my chemistry degree and PhD at Glasgow University. And then I joined ICI in 1994 to work in catalyst research, which I'm still involved in today. My current employer is Johnson Matthey, and I'm the manager of our analytical group, which is based here in Billingham on Teesside. In terms of mentoring for CChem, I started doing this over 20 years ago. I started mentoring because at the time, I was one of the very few people on site who had chartered status. And so I mentored people on a fairly ad hoc basis, mentoring both established staff and early career individuals. And I think that's important about CChem. Although in our organisation, certainly we link our accredited scheme to early career employees. We have individuals doing the CChem with us right now who are at all points in their career. We have become more organised at Johnson Matthey more recently, and we have a GM RSE accredited scheme, which we started 2 years ago. And currently we have 53 people working through the CChem, or towards a CChem status throughout the UK. And I am the scheme coordinator of this scheme. So we've got it as a cohort system. So we start a cohort off every, say, 6 months, and each cohort is roughly 15 people on it. So therefore we've got up to numbers now. We've got 4 cohorts currently. Cohort 1's getting near the end of its 2 years. And so at the moment we're about 53 people going through that. So it's been very successful, the accredited scheme. In terms of going back to being a mentor and my own mentoring style, I'd like to think I am encouraging, but also I'd like to stretch the candidates to aim as high as possible. The reason why I want to stretch the candidates is that you're going to go through the CChem experience once, so therefore I try and get them to get the most out of the process as possible. Also, in terms of continual professional development, I want to instill a sort of behaviour of looking for new challenges and working outside your comfort zone, because that's really useful for long-term career aspirations as well. So it's getting that way of thinking about doing new things and pushing on. In terms of tips, I really liked your tip, Claire, about getting the CV down on day one. So I've actually took a note of that, and that's going to be one of my tips in the future. I'm going to start doing that, because I think that's a great example of where you can see where the person starts and what their CV would look at like at the end, and it'd be so clear. And it's one of the things I've found about mentoring people. It's the mentees. One of the things they feed back to me afterwards is how much they didn't realise how much they changed since even their degree, and how all the skills they had. And as you mentioned, Claire, some people don't give you that. You don't get that on your day to day. You don't always get that credit of what you can actually achieve and where you've got to already. So it's a good reflection for the candidate. Anyway, one of the tips I've got is, as a mentor, sometimes when you start mentoring a new a candidate, your first few discussions can be quite general. But I start to encourage the candidates to start writing drafts or their attribute evidence statements as early as possible. So say we have a really good discussion around A1, I would suggest to the candidate, well, why don't you try writing that up for the next meeting? Write up what that looks like as a draft reflective statement. And in this way, the candidate starts to develop the language and tone required for these evidence statements. And also when you write it up, it starts to crystallise your thoughts, and you can start to evaluate the strength of your evidence as well. Think, okay, it sounded good, but now I write it down, it doesn't sound quite as strong as maybe I imagined. And I've found this technique really useful in terms of the candidate spreading the workload out more evenly during the process. And so it's not such a massive task to complete the final submission documentation, whichever scheme you're doing, if it's a 1-year scheme or a 2-year scheme. So that was my tip. But I'm going to add your tip too as well, Claire. That's excellent. I think one of the most surprising things I've gained from the CChem mentoring over the years is the amount that I've personally learned and gained from the experience. I've opted, where possible, to mentor candidates who are in quite different sections of the company or different parts of the company. So I get to learn technically about different work, but I'm learning from a researcher perspective rather than a business level communicator. I'm getting to hear what it's actually like in the teams that are doing the work. And also, now that I'm getting further in,
Managed to lose you again, Gordon. Do you want to pop off mute? Something's hitting it by accident, I think.
oh, I'll just get too excited there. So where did I stop? I've started as I do tend to mentor candidates now much younger than myself, which I really like. And I like getting the different perspectives and outlooks. And during the mentoring process, I share some information about what I do as well, and I learn about their job. So it becomes a little bit about reverse mentoring. I've benefited from that. I think it's helped me sharpen up, certainly, my communication skills when I'm communicating to the whole of GM, Johnson Matthey. I can't just pitch at my age group and experience level. I've got to make my message accessible to as large a group as possible. So I've actually learned a lot from that as well in terms of reverse mentoring. Of course, I am not a perfect mentor. I don't think such a thing exists. What I still think about when I'm mentoring, and I've got to stop myself, I've got to really listen, listening and really active listening to the candidate and not going into problem solving mode, which a lot of my other parts of my role are about. You hear a little bit of information and then you start to solve the problem. That's not what mentoring or coaching is about. And I want to start signposting candidates towards people or ideas rather than directing. I want to start suggesting other people they could speak to or other networks or other approaches rather than saying, I would do this or I would do that. And finally, my last thing I'm going to work on is I'm going to stop monologuing about things that I have done in the past. They're never quite the same as what the candidate is going through. And the solutions that I came up with are unlikely to be as useful as I think they are. So in some ways it's about, because I remember getting mentored from, I've been mentored as well. And then I hear the example and think, well, what's that got to do with what we were talking about? So it's something I've got, and I've got, as an older mentor, I'm starting to do the same myself. I've got to keep, unless it's absolutely linked to what we're talking about, keep those kind of monologues to myself. And I think I'll end there. And I don't know if I'm starting to see things that you're agreeing with, Paul, or or things that you've noticed.
That's completely different. It's going to be a nightmare now. No, I actually find that it's been quite comforting actually for me in a lot of what you guys have said. I think if it was a different type of presentation and repeating what other people have said wouldn't be a good thing, but in this case I've got some recognition to myself now that I'm doing it the right way, because I'm not about to say anything that's completely different to what either of you two have said. So that's good news. And I did just to outdo Gordon, I did a slide. It's not very exciting, but hopefully you can see it. But I just need something to talk at while I was doing it. So as a quick introduction to myself, so my name is Paul, and I work at Reading Scientific Services Limited as a technical specialist in the investigative team, and my passion is obviously chromatography, hence the two-dimensional GC plot I added just for, you didn't just have to look at my face basically. It's a plot, I think this was one of a series of rums that I ran, so it actually might be that my passion is alcohol, but from a work sense it's definitely chromatography. And so it's quite depressing when I went back to sort of check dates and things. So I've been an analytical chemist for the past 30 years, and I became a CChem back in 2000 when it was quite different to the process now. I think it's a lot more rigorous now, and I think it's very helpful. I think it really aids development as well as you go forward. And I was pleased to get my fellowship 2 years ago in 2022. I initially got involved with all of this because I decided to do an NVQ level 5 in analytical chemistry, and that was my first experience of anything with a mentoring element to it, or at least anything that had a official requirement for a mentor. I think we've all had unofficial mentoring from friends and colleagues over the years, but doing the qualification, this led me to then becoming a mentor for someone who was going through it themselves. And then I got involved with helping on the panel that was looking at the attributes for the NVQ. And it's nice, I think, then to give back to the RSC as well. I think it's important for people to realize, though, that once the RSC have you in their sights, that there's no escape. You're sitting there and you're afraid. And yeah, so it was part of giving back to the RSC. I went from reviewing NVQs to reviewing Chartered Scientist and revalidations for people as well, and approving chromatography courses. And at the moment I sit on the Analytical Chemistry Trust Fund, and just a plug for that, if any of you are early years researchers, it's worth looking up. They offer fantastic support for people doing conferences and people trying to get their PhDs and such like. And I've had some involvement with CAMS as well, the Community of Analytical Measurement Science. And then finally, I run the mentoring program they have at RSSL. RSSL is a lot smaller than, say, Johnson Matthey. We've got maybe 300 staff. So we've been looking at the one-to-one sessions, but also group mentoring sessions as well, which have really been quite powerful. With regards to my approach to mentoring, I usually start with a meeting. It's interesting listening to Claire talk about having a structure to it, and I've tended to use the structure of the attributes as the starting point. We do have a mentoring contract we use when we're doing general mentoring at work, which isn't supposed to be particularly formal, but it's supposed to just give people, again, an opportunity to reflect and think about what they want to get out of the mentoring. And then really it's a case I like to just remind people that it's getting into a certain mindset. A lot of it can appear quite daunting at first, but a lot of it is just doing your day job, but then just picking out the parts of your day job which fulfill the requirements. And like I say, it can be a bit overwhelming at first, but I think it becomes easier the more that people are familiarizing themselves with the attributes. So for example, some people will have them and maybe have them pinned to their desk or something just on the wall, so that they can, when they're working away, they're trying to get them into the habit of going, oh, that email provides evidence for A1, doesn't it? Let's put that somewhere and keep it safe. I also like to discuss with people the benefits, like it's been discussed before. Why are you doing this? I like to discuss the benefits of doing it with people, and we actually use some of the attributes as part of sort of early careers promotion progress. And what I like to say to people is, when we're looking through the attributes and we're trying to decide which ones they feel confident in, which ones they're struggling in, are there opportunities now to be garnered from going to your line manager and saying, you're supporting me through this CChem, I need to do a presentation, or I need to manage a difficult project or something, can you give me that one to do, or can I do that? Can you get more career opportunities from doing this? I also like to, as someone who assesses these things, I always a bit selfish, but I like to emphasize the need to be clear with the evidence, to label it and really draw the assessor to the pertinent points. I think I've checked too many things now where there's giant folder of evidence, and if it's not really well labeled, then the assessor's digging for it, and you want to give the assessor every opportunity to pass you. And I mean, to be honest, that's what they're looking to do. If you've gone to that effort, they you know, they're on your side, but you don't want them to be digging around for the evidence. So I try to talk about structure of a portfolio and making it very clear what the evidence is timely, it's relevant, etc. And then I hope this doesn't sound harsh, but I think Kim mentioned it slightly as well. So I'm hoping it sounds okay. But with regards to people who sort of struggle to get going, and I'm not great. I'm not a fan of chasing people. You know, my feeling is that we're all grown-ups, and it's been said before, but it's your qualification. So you need to be taking charge. You need to be booking meetings in. You need to be the one who is actually leading this. I think it's important as a development thing for people to be doing that. So yeah, like I said, I don't go around trying to arrange the meetings. I leave it to the mentee. I mean, I say that I will chase that with people more on a, how are you getting on? Are you okay? Do you need any help? And sometimes if people have found, I've had it where people have found it a little bit overwhelming. Maybe they're overthinking it, because I think scientists do sometimes overthink things. And so we will sit down and maybe put a matrix together. Let's have all the attributes. Let's see where you've got to. And it usually surprises people when we talk it through about how much information that they've collected and how far through the process they've gone. I haven't had someone yet where that hasn't happened. It'd be a bit awkward if it did, and I don't know where we'd go from there. But typically people have putting in the work, then they'll realize they've got a lot more than they first thought. Typically I'm meeting with people every few months, and having these appointments in the calendar, it can give people deadlines as well, something to work to, especially at the beginning when perhaps it's harder to get going and you've not quite got the mindset that, you know, it's another thing I'm doing, and rather than this is part of my day job, I can do this. They're thinking of it as an extra task, and they've got their job to do, and blah blah. So it can be a great motivator to have these in the calendar to sort of drive people forwards. And I think questions I often get asked is this enough evidence? And I always suggest quality over quantity. I'd say have less pieces of evidence, of good evidence. Don't just start throwing evidence at it in the hope that you'll hit the attribute. And then the other one is, oh, I don't know how to handle this. What do I do for this attribute? It helps if you've done a few that you can sort of suggest ideas, but also, and it has been mentioned previously, but I do rely on the RSC. I say, let's go and look at their materials, because there's lots of good examples in there that people can work through. And I think the more you do as a mentor, the more ideas you also have of things that will work as well. I also suggest that giving your referee your attributes. I don't think it hurts just when the referee is making a statement if they're being guided by what it was you were hoping to achieve in the first place with their language as well. And I've learned from doing this that you don't have to have all the answers. I think maybe that's maybe a difference in coaching and mentoring. When you're mentoring someone, you're steering the person to an answer, or you're giving them confidence to believe what they're doing. I mean, if someone's doing a CChem, then they're an intelligent, motivated person, and I think sometimes they just need reassurance or a little tip just to push them in the right direction. I find certainly it's very useful if you just get people to talk through their latest piece of work with the attributes in front of us, and we'll discuss it in detail, and you'll start to see, oh, that works for that works for that. And also the fact that one piece of evidence can work for a couple of things. If it's a good piece of evidence, people sometimes start thinking quite isolated about each of the attributes. Oh, I've got A1 for this, I haven't got anything for A2. And I'm saying, well, that piece you've got there is really good. Let's flesh that out, and it will cover both. And just while I was putting this together, it did make me think more about mentoring it, and I ended up reaching out and asking other people I'd mentored for some feedback and what their thoughts, what they needed from a mentor. And the comments I had back really were that having a mentor that was familiar with your work can be helpful. It's not crucial, but it can be helpful. Obviously, you can build up a relationship over time. I've been lucky in that I've had people, other analytical chemists within RSSL, so because they have an idea of what they're doing. And then they also said they appreciated it when you have experiences that you can give to them, talking through your job with them. I think that's come up previously, can be really useful to help them reflect on what aspects of their job that they need to think about to meet the attributes. That was the end of my bit of waffle. I don't know if it helps, but hopefully.
So, thank you so much, Paul, Gordon, and Claire and Kim. I think we've had really interesting insights from all of the presenters. I know that there'll be people out there busy writing questions or perhaps having put questions in already. I'm going to, as chair of the panel, though, just throw in some initial thoughts while I have an opportunity before our colleagues in the RSC start giving us the questions. And we, I mean, I have to say, I listened to my colleagues here, Gordon and Paul, and I thought, gosh, what experienced mentors, what reassuring approach. And it occurred to me, we are experienced mentors. There are people on this call who may not have mentored yet. Thinking back, panel colleagues, to that first time that you took somebody on, let's take ourselves back a little bit and maybe give a top tip for somebody who's a first-time mentor to say, well, that first opening up meeting that you had, let's just think back to how could we run that best, that first contact. And any thoughts going back to your early mentoring? Gordon, shall I pass that one to you first?
What I did much more in my early mentoring was I would be in contact with the RSC. If I got to an attribute or an area I didn't really understand, I'd get in touch. There's probably a lot more information available on the websites, and you could get this information on webinars. But back then, it was just an email to the RSC saying, I'm working on this attribute, and give me any advice. And they would always reply to me with really great advice. So I think that was something I did with my early candidates, which I needed less further on. I was more confident in the attributes themselves.
Yeah, no, great. Reach back to the Centre for Support. That's a great example. Paul, anything you want to add to that?
It's very similar, to be honest with you. I often still actually I print off some information to bring with me to the first one, so that we can, if I get any tricky questions, I've got stuff from the RSC and I can say, well, let's go through it. Let's look at this, and here's some examples. And I'd also point people often to people that I've mentored and say, if can we maybe have a look at what you've done? Can we have a chat with you? And just give people encouragement. I think people who've crossed the finish line already.
I think, absolutely. I think I can still remember the first mentoring opening up session I had with my first mentee after achieving my CChem. And I remember I went and had lunch with her in the canteen, and I can remember having a conversation with her. And then after that, and I love that you talked about this, Paul, I managed to get a mentoring contract copy for the company I was working with, had introduced that. And I had forgotten how much I relied on that. That's now become embedded in how I do my discussions. But I don't have that written contract anymore. And that's, we three probably have forgotten how much embedded knowledge we have. So it would be great perhaps to share that mentoring contract with the RSC as a great top tip, and it's that embedded knowledge we're trying quickly to share with people today.
Also, now you mentioned that, Claire, I was quite panicky about the first couple, I think, because I wanted to be a good mentor, if that makes sense. So, but I think I found people who have just done their CChems can be very good mentors because they're very up and aware of the system and the trip.
Hello. I think I've lost signal.
Yeah, I think we've lost Gordon now.
I thought it was me.
No, if a cat walks across his screen and he's faking it.
So
I think I was thrown off there. I was thrown off, but finished anyway.
You segued me lovely into the next question that I was kind of ticking over for me, which was, I'm curious to share experience between where we've seen people through the PDP process and the direct entrance. And there will be mentors on the call today who may experience both types. So that would be great for us just to maybe chew over that a little bit. As Paul, something you've had experience of?
I think people find really find it easy. I don't know what you think, but when they're building up through 2 years and gathering their evidence, sometimes when people go, I'm going to do a direct entry, then they're looking at everything at once and they're going, oh, how am I going to find all this? Sometimes when you're sitting down and just and you have to take the same approach really, but when they're doing it over the 2 years, they don't always have all the evidence, so they're looking and they're building it up and it feels more manageable. And sometimes people can be a little bit, I think I've got a chap now who's much more senior than me, and he's going, oh, I just haven't got started. I just haven't got started. I know I've got it all, but I just don't know where to start. And it's like, you just got to break this down a bit. But when you haven't got it all to start with, maybe it's less daunting and you just step through it.
Well, that is a great example. Gordon, do you?
Yes, I mean, I get this question quite often because we run our accredited scheme. It's a 2-year scheme, and some of the candidates could go directly and do it over 12 months. So I give them advice, but I'm biased because I think the 2-year scheme is the way to go. What's the 12-year scheme, the direct scheme, seems to me very retrospective, and I think you used that very word on the slides, rather than forward-looking, forward planning, and thinking about your career going forward. It's a bit like looking at your career going backwards. So that whole dynamic, I prefer the 2-year scheme. Some people are put off by 2 years, and you think, oh, I can do it in a year, as if that's better. But 2 years will go quickly. If somebody's done 30 years plus, 2 years goes really quickly. And you spend that time with your mentor, you spend your time thinking about your career. So I don't think doing it quicker is better necessarily. So yeah, but there can be different circumstances. Sometimes people have got to do it in a shorter time frame because they've got less time to do it in, and they've got something they want to do it before they do something else. And that's fine. So I've done both, but I do prefer the 2-year scheme.
Understood, absolutely. I think for me, where I've worked with direct and PDP, I think the difficulty for people who go direct is they have so much stuff. How do they know how to hone it into a really good story? And that is where a mentor can really help them, is honing their story through conversation to certainly really pull out the key pieces. I quite like some of the direct ones. Typically, though, my experience has been, and Paul's probably put his finger on it for me, it's typically been more senior leaders. And yes. I like the leadership part. That's why I like it. Yes. That you go for it as a senior leader, regardless of grade, regardless of where you're in your career.
The thing about the direct one as well, sometimes people have got great evidence, but it's just time barred. And it's like, you can't use that. It's too long ago. So they've got this fantastic thing, but it's actually time barred.
Excellent, good example. Anything the RSC staff would like to add on that comment? Because you'll obviously see both types of portfolios.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we do kind of see different approaches really. With PDP, we tend to see it more as sort of a process as people go through. So as people review the evidence, it does change. So, I might have a consultation with somebody at the beginning of the process and then towards the end of the process, and actually their evidence and examples might have changed quite a lot in terms of what they were doing at the beginning to then what they actually submit at the end. And mentors are really key parts of that because you're helping people review, refine, helping with those development opportunities. We do tend to see that maybe directs are more reflective, I guess, but certainly for PDP there's definitely a clear stream of development going across those 2 years, perhaps compared to direct.
Okay, thank you. Kim, something you wanted to add?
I just think that with the direct award, one thing we do tend to notice is that there's an awful lot more, as Claire said, there is more reflection, but sometimes it goes back too far. And sometimes the applicants write lots about, I graduated then, and this is what I did in my degree, and then, and we don't want that. We only want stuff from the past 2 years. And so if mentors could keep an eye on that, we'd be very grateful as well.
No, that would be good. I'm conscious I've thrown some questions in. I haven't given you a chance to pop any in from.
I've just spotted Alex said, I've really enjoyed the discussion. What are your thoughts on mentoring people in your line management chain? That's a very good question.
Oh, lovely. So above me or below me?
Oh, that's true. I've done that as well.
And Paul's already given an example. I'll kick off. My preference is not to mentor in my line. However, it gets harder as an executive director with a large group department and being one of the few senior leading visible scientists in the executive team. So
Yeah.
I do want to mentor, but I do try and direct people in my line elsewhere as a first call. But you know what? If people have come and asked me, it's usually because they want to reach out in particular, because it kind of depends on how it's come about. Typically, though, I would prefer not to. Now, fortunately, above me is my CEO, and she's a mechanical engineer, so I won't be mentoring her and she's chartered already. However, I think that'd be really tough mentoring above me, but I think, yeah, we've got integrity as one of our core, values. We've got a code of ethics we can work to. I think we could make it work.
I mean, I've done
I'm
both.
gonna,
I've done
yeah, go
both.
ahead.
I've mentored people who are not my team. I've mentored, and I've line managed people directly, and I've mentored. I prefer if the person, I'm not line managing them, because if I'm line managing them, I get to know them anyway. If I'm mentoring someone, I'm getting to know someone else, and for the mentee as well, it's someone else they're talking about their career. You should be talking about their career with their manager anyway, but it's somebody else, and I think that's important. It's an extra thing you can get if you're CChem mentors, not your line manager. But I've done both. In some circumstances, you have to, because there's not enough people or whatever. And at the moment, I don't directly mentor because I'm running the scheme, but I'm going to start mentoring again in January. So yeah, I'm going to go back into it again after 2 years from direct mentoring.
So I'm just going to try and pick up another question from the chat, Paul. I'm wondering if you would be able to give this one a go, which is
God, go on then.
One of our joinees is asking, what's the main cause of low compatibility between a mentee and a mentor? And this is a great question, because I was going to ask us as a panel to talk about this as well. What's happening, what's going on there? They've written us a bit of let's talk a bit more about how come it doesn't work. And I think Paul and Gordon, the question I was going to ask you, which is very similar, but I thought we should introduce, which was, tell us about time it hasn't worked and how did we handle it? And that would be useful, I think, for
Paul,
mentors.
you're
But
first.
Paul, go
There's two aspects to me, because I still sort of see CChem mentoring as slightly different to general mentoring. So the mentoring contract works from a compatibility point of view, and I always say to people, one of the downsides of kind of running the mentoring thing is that people often come to me and go, will you be my mentor? And I often say, just because I run it doesn't mean it should be me. But no, I don't say it like that, but that's but what I will say is, let's look at what you want to get out of it. So sometimes that compatibility can be filtered out through the structured side of things. If it's on that general mentor, you can say, what are you trying to get out? I'm going to be honest, that I'm not the right person. And I'll also say to people, because some people will say to me on that, they'll say, how many mentors should I have? Is it just one? And I'll say, go and have a chat with 3 or 4, find out which one fits you best, and go from there. And I think you can do that with this as well. I mean, you'd like to think compatibility for the CChem, would work quite well. I mean, we've talked, I wouldn't want to discourage people from stepping across professions or boundaries or something. I think if you're in the same building, if you're working with the same, in the same sort of area, you'd like to hope that compatibility will be there. And as long as you've got someone, the mentor also obviously has to give time. As long as that person's willing to give time, I'm struggling on the thinking of some time when it hasn't been compatible. The only one I've gotten of someone at the moment is saying about wanting to do the full one, and they're umming and ahhing, and that's down to them and them saying, I don't know, I'm just so busy, I don't know, and that kind of thing. But we've had some good chats about it. I think it's important, and Gordon said it earlier about that, getting to know someone at the beginning, and maybe there's a point where you don't quite rub together, but I've not seen that myself. I think if you get making that effort at the beginning, getting to know them, hopefully you can take that forward. But I would say, if it isn't working, don't be frightened to go and find someone else.
Yep.
Don't stick with it, because it's for your, if you're the mentee, it's for your benefit to get the CChem. You want to be working with someone you're comfortable with.
Thank you, Paul. Gordon, I think you look like you're going to have some experience to share.
Well, think about compatibility. We don't have any great measurements on it, but we have looked back to see how many people started a CChem. This is going back, say, 10, 15 years of data, and how many people actually completed. And our completion rate isn't 100%. It's about 80%. And there's various reasons why people don't complete, and in that could be compatibility with their mentor. But it's something I do talk to our new mentors about, is because they can feel quite bad if something doesn't work out and someone doesn't progress their CChem, to sort of make them understand that not everybody who starts a CChem will get all the way to completion. It could be job changes, circumstance changes, and all the rest of it in amongst that. So that's I don't have the figures on compatibility. I've not lost a mentee. I don't know if that and quite a few people I mentored through CChem, I still mentor still. It's still sort of like more like a career mentor. So that's but yeah, it does happen. You've got to be realistic about it and don't take it too personally if you lose a mentee along the way.
People have left the business after I've mentored them, but I'm thinking they went on to better things, hopefully. But,
So with myself, I have been a senior coordinator for a large company accredited scheme, and part of my job was matching mentees and mentors. And I did have a pool of 60 people going through registered scientist technician, MRC, Chartered Chemist. And I did have a pool of mentors, and I did have compatibility issues that, and it did become that was great for the people involved, because they could kind of come to an independent party, which was me, and say, this isn't quite working from my side or their side. And let me share with you then the kind of the things that I saw. It was typically because of expectation setting. So where a mentor saw that it was entirely down to the mentee, and the mentee was a bit inexperienced and maybe lacked confidence and needed a bit more nurture and nudging. So I used to have some mentors that I knew would give that extra bit of nurture and nudge, and I would just help them onto those sort of candidates. So typically it was around expectations. Very occasionally it was just because, you know what, sometimes we just don't get on with people and our styles rub up, and it was as simple as that. The communication styles didn't match. But most of the time it was expectations. Okay. And the mentor saying, well, I'm expecting them to do this and I'm getting fed up because they haven't done it. So that's one of the reasons I think that mentoring contract is a great kind of tool, that refresher. So I'm just conscious, probably time is getting tight. Our people on the call are probably thinking, when are they going to finish and let's get some lunch? Paul, Gordon, myself, let's give people one thing that we would suggest as a mentor to walk away from today. One takeaway for Paul, one thing, top tip, or for a mentor or not.
I think I go back to something I said actually, but you don't have to have all the answers. Don't put that pressure on yourself. Just work through it with them, and don't be afraid to lean on the RSC. I probably got quite a lot of emails sent. Kim, could you help me with this, please? Or Claire, what's this? And so don't be afraid. Just do your best. Really, that's all you can do.
Thank you, Gordon. A do or a don't?
Don't panic about all your attributes. Look at it more holistically. Has a candidate and got to a really good standard across the whole piece? There might be areas they're stronger in and areas where there's less strong evidence, but don't look at it holistically about the whole process.
Thank you. And my do, this is going to be a slightly interesting one. Do volunteer to do your CPD for your Chartered Chemist, because you know what, you will put yourself through a very similar process, and
volunteer
it will teach you a lot.
Volunteer.
You can volunteer.
I didn't know such a thing was possible.
You can volunteer to do your CPD and submit it. Why not?
I've
why
done
not give it a go?
I've been caught twice already.
It's a great refresher. And listen, I think I should wrap up this panel today. Thank you so much to Claire, to Kim, to Gordon, to Paul. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you to those of you who spent the time, joined us, listened. Wonderful. What a great session. Bye for now.